All right. So, setting the context a little bit, John, Mason, and I chatted last week just about analytics, value stream stuff, plans, roadmap, some of the challenges we were facing, and some of the customer needs of just like having more actionable contextual information and boards and views. He suggested that we kind of do a collaborative design session to kind of talk about that a little bit more. Because I do agree, Kanban boards are pretty much like played out to a certain degree in terms of what they can do. And since we have everything in the same application, we have a unique opportunity to look at the value stream of how work flows in a different way. So I think we kind of want to touch on that a little bit. And I don't know where we want to start. I don't have an agenda other than like, let's talk about some of the root problems. John, do you have anything you want to add to tee us up?
Well, what I might recommend is that we share a few ideas and competing products. You share, very briefly some of the work that you had done. We try to time box that to just a few minutes, and then we go into a sketching exercise and just have everybody do their own sketches for a few minutes. Snap some pictures with your iPhone or your Android device, share the pictures, chat about them, see if we have time for another round, and see what we learned.
Cool.
That's my proposal anyway.
Sounds good. If you want, I can kind of run through a couple different products that are out there that we're looking at, or at least from a planning standpoint, if that would be helpful. Just high level. Cool. I'll share my screen. Should be able to see this. This is the first one. This is Pivotal Tracker. This is kind of tailored towards teams that do time box iterations or sprints, Scrum, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily a Kanban board, but the nice thing about it is it's all in one view. Like your basic work item is a story. You can also have epics, which are over here, stay over here in this list. And so your epics are linked to your issues by a label, like a linked label. Can kind of have a high level description here, but what ends up happening is when you link a bunch of things into your epic, based on what your velocity is and how you weight your stories, it auto schedules your sprints for you or your iterations based on your velocity over the last number of sprints. And then it will also like tell you when your epic is going to be done. Like if you hover over it, based on where things fall on the schedule, it'll give you like an estimated completion date, which this is what I used before I came to GitLab, just because it was simple. It was all in one view. And then I literally could get the icebox where all the new stories got dumped. I could organize those into epics. And then you can also drop releases into this kind of timeline view, and they kind of just act as a card. So basically as a product manager, all I had to do was make sure that these were prioritized from 1 to however many. And everything went through like a normal workflow where you just start, you finish a card, you deliver the card, and then the product manager or whoever the stakeholder is accepts and rejects it. And then they recently, well, not that recently anymore, but they added a bunch of analytics into it, which was nice. So you can see project trends, which is your velocity and points accepted over time. And you basically have detailed reports for each of these. You can see stories accepted, a cycle time, rejection rate, which is how many times did the stakeholder reject a delivered issue because it didn't meet the acceptance criteria or whatever. You have burnup charts, cumulative flow, and then you can dig into kind of some deeper things. Like if you want a per iteration report, you can get that. You can get a breakdown of your epics of like, points in progress. What's the completion date for this? So it's like a quick way to do that. You also have release reports, which is a similar type thing to an iteration. It's just a bigger time box, like our milestones. An activity breakdown that has kind of details, and then your cycle time for different things. So you can actually see it per issue. And then I guess that will roll up into this like kind of nice chart here that ends up happening. But it's not meant for like a giant portfolio. It's like you have one project where you have everything, and then what you can end up doing, I think, is you can have workspaces now where you can group like up to 3 or 4 issues from different projects into one kind of consolidated view for you to manage. But this is it. Questions about it? Feedback? Anything you want me to click through, explore a little bit more?
Just to say, I also am a Pivotal Tracker fan, having used it at Urban Code.
So what is it about this board that solves your pain points so much better than our board, for example?
It's all in one thing, and it's all prioritized. I don't have to have cross sections of workflow states, right? So in Pivotal Tracker, you can't define like what steps a story goes through. It basically is defined for you. You start it, right? You finish it, you deliver it, and then you accept or reject it, and that's it. So I don't need those like vertical swim lanes. And what's nice about it is that it ties together my epics in one view. So like if I link all these issues into my epics over here, all I have to do to know when an epic is going to be done is hover over this. And based on how I've prioritized everything in this list, it's automatically going to tell me the date, right? It's easy for engineers. So like they can't start an issue until they put a story point or an estimate on it, which forces you to have a conversation. So like it forces you at different points to have conversations about things. And then it always prompts me. So like as a stakeholder looking at this, I know I have 2 issues that I need to go review because I'm the one who's responsible for like doing that on the team. And so it's easy to kind of see that. It's easy to see when you have like a long list of things, who's working on what's in flight. And it's basically, it auto schedules your iteration. So I don't have to worry about thinking about, well, how much can we fit into a sprint? Like it just will say like, this is what you can do based on what you've done in the past. And if you happen to get done with all your stuff, great. You can pull new things in. Like it's not keeping you from doing that, but it just simplified one view, never have to go anywhere else, like to manage at least like understanding what we can plan, what we can get done, what's in flight, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Really eliminates a lot of motion. A lot of dragging around is just not there. It just does it for you.
Yep.
And it assumes that the team has weighted everything before, like they've gone through a process and weighted all the work that could potentially be in flight.
Yeah, you can't start. So if you notice here, like this is the story point scale, and you can set it up like on a per project basis. So I think you can go into more settings, and you basically pick when you start your iteration, what the project starts, time zones, how many weeks long they are, initial velocity, and then what your point scale is. So because you do that, it will basically force you to estimate it before it can be started, which is helpful because then you basically, the way I did this before is we would have backlog grooming sessions where we would just go through and like we'd hop on a call like this and we'd talk through what does this story mean? We'd have a conversation about it, and then the engineers would just put a weight on it. We'd go to the next one and talk about it. So it's more synchronous conversational type approach to things, which is like in the traditional agile sense, the card which we have on our boards and which are here is supposed to represent a conversation, right? And so you don't write a bunch of requirements on it because that's wasteful. Like what if you don't end up doing it? You like basically write a sentence as a placeholder, have a conversation, and then you talk about it right before you start it and flesh it out and put an estimate on it. So
that makes sense. Holly, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's totally fine. Those were good questions. I just wanted to kind of quickly walk through that left column and ensure that I understand how it's functioning, if you don't mind. Sure. So it looks like we've got items that are starred and bugs. I'm guessing that's issue types, feature versus bug or something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can have right here, you can add a story type, which is a feature, bug, chore, or release. The release is the thing that will give you like kind of the milestone. And if you like create a like release.1.0 or something like this, I can go ahead and set a fixed date for this. And based on the date that I set, it will automatically put that down into my timeline view. Right. So I can drag it around. And if I say the release is on a given date, it will basically give me a burn down chart for everything above this that we need to get done before it. So like that's kind of how you include everything above it gets included in the release. And then if the date moves, it will actually show you the things that will fall out of it if you can't get them done by that date. So
you're defining the dates.
I define the date for the release, yes. And then it will tell me everything that will fit in that date based on my velocity.
So is that what's happening with the dates on the right? The April 27th and like, are you defining those dates, or is it defining those dates based on the weight and the team velocity? And
it defines these dates because these are what I set in my settings over here for my iteration schedule. So I said it starts on the 20th. My iteration length is 1 week. And that's it. So it basically automatically creates a new iteration for me every week, starting on Monday, because that's what I said. So you see this number right here is the iteration count, and then this is the date of the iteration, if that makes sense. So it's basically saying, and this is my current one right here, which is 27th through May 3rd, or maybe that's the one coming up next week. I'm not sure. No, that's this week. Yeah. So this is what this week is. This is next week's. This is the following week, and I only have one thing in next week because my velocity is 10, and this is like an 8-point story, so I can't fit anything else below it in. So,
but the entire column represents one iteration.
It represents 3. So
okay, that's what I was a little bit confused about still then too. So each section represents one iteration, and it's broken down by points for each of those iterations.
Yeah, so if I add another thing here, see, I'm adding all these points because I have this many points in the backlog. It's automatically creating the iterations to hold all of the weight that I have. So,
and then the last 2 questions, actually, the accept and reject, that is that the work has been done and you're signing off on it, or that's you're approving or rejecting the proposal?
The finished work. So usually like the way the workflow would go is like, an engineer would click start, or they would use a commit hook or something like that from a branch in GitHub or GitLab or whatever. And it would basically say, I'm going to start this issue, which would transition to the state. When they get their issue up for reviews, they would click finish or ready for reviews. And then more or less, this would basically be saying it's in review right now because it hasn't been delivered. After the review is done and it gets merged, you hit deliver, which means it's live somewhere that a stakeholder can go accept it. And then this is where I would go accept it in whatever environment we had for our acceptance environment, usually production. And so I could go through and be like, okay, yes, this meets what we talked about. This meets my expectations as a stakeholder. And then I click accept, you know. And so this was particularly useful as a product owner or product manager, but also as somebody who worked with external stakeholders that had, like, we were our customers that we were building things for. They had to be the ones to accept it because like it was the sign of saying this meets what we talked about, like here, like make sure it conforms to what you expected. And then if they would reject it, we would have a conversation, be like, is this a real rejection, or like in the original requirements we missed, or is this something that like you think you want, but you didn't specify it, you know? And that would be a good way to trigger like scope creep and things like that.
Makes sense. Last question. Thank you for going through that. The checkboxes on the right, I assume that's so you can select a specific story and do something with it, but I'm curious what you can do with it here.
This is new since the last time I used it. This used to not be here, but it looks like you can bulk label, bulk move. I can just bulk actions. So I could do that. Test QA. Oh, it looks like you can have different kinds of reviews. So that's a new feature too. Clone, signing things.
Thank you.
How did y'all keep from having a long icebox of work you hadn't prioritized? It looks like this hasn't prioritized or been groomed.
Well,
Yes.
the icebox would just be really giant sometimes, and that's okay. I mean, that's just, it's a holding tank.
Yeah, I would go through. You can, like in the icebox, you can like kind of drag and drop things around too. So similar, like you have your things that have been prioritized, like we're going to do this. And then you have, I would maintain the drag and drop order here. I personally, what I would do, and when I would start getting over like 50, like where I couldn't see it in one view, I go to the bottom and I delete everything. Which I know it sounds crazy, but the theory is like maintaining a lot of stories around is actually more confusing because people don't know what's accurate or what's not. And it's basically like you consider an inventory that is, and inventory costs money to hold. So don't keep it. And if it's something important, it will come up again and you'll prioritize it, you know? So.
And Gabe, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a few other screens and then we can drop right into our exercise.
Sure.
Just before you do that, John Mason, maybe I can summarize the key things that I think came out of that, so we're all on the same page. I listed some of the features there. I don't need to go through the features, but I think maybe some of the principles that seemed to stand out for Gabe were optimizing for the PM to prioritize while also automating a lot of the rote tasks, providing the insights in context of the workflow and the tracker, and then sort of prompting collaboration based on sort of stage in the process, which is a little bit more informed based on the more standardized workflow that's there. If that's accurate enough.
I think that's pretty spot on.
Yep, and just the idea of eliminating motions. I think it's really key.
What do you mean by
All
that?
right.
Just want to make sure I understand what you mean.
What I mean is every time I have to click or drag or update, that's a motion. And you want every motion to have real meaning and value. And if you can find ways of, achieving the same thing without those motions, you're going to move faster. You're going to be a lot less busy.
A good example is not once in the course of using Pillow Tracker did I ever have to have 2 tabs open, ever. Right? I literally could do it all in one tab in one view. I only always had one tab open, and I never had to leave that one screen to manage my projects.
That would be ideal.
All right, I'm just going to share this screen real quick and then one more. What we're looking at here is a board from version 1. And the thing I want you to see here is that this is like a Kanban board in that you've got columns representing stages of your process, but you can't actually see the text of the stories here. And that might seem like a big limitation, and in some ways it is, but on the other hand, it definitely helps me understand what I need to worry about. I can clearly see red dots where I need to pay attention to things, to intervene where something is stuck or something's problematic. So if what you're trying to do is kind of understand the flow of work, understand what sorts of things I need to act on, have prompts, in a stand-up meeting or something like that, this is pretty helpful. I'm not sure what the version numbers up in the corner are. I don't know if those are release numbers or milestone numbers. They look like it, but
they're release numbers.
You know this already. Have you used this, Holly?
I worked at version 1 for 4 years.
Awesome. Well, good. You can bring lots of insight into this.
I didn't work on this particular product, but I know that one of the problems with this view was that people couldn't quickly see what was red and what was green in terms of the details. So they would have to actually hover to interact and get that information.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me share one more picture. So yeah, I mean, just visually contrast here, right? Our Kanban board today, right? Versus this one. Yes, there are limitations there. But
would this be every board, or would that just be a view of the board? Was the board like always in that state? Holly or John, whoever would know.
What do you mean, was it always in that state as opposed to what?
Is that like a collapsed view, or is there a view where you could like actually see the tickets, issues, whatever they are?
That was a different board. This board, I believe, was specifically focused on more of the like pipeline DevOps side of things, whereas you had like your traditional Scrum boards, which was a separate board view. So this one was just kind of focused specifically on a portion of the process, if I recall.
Thank you. It's an interesting idea.
What you're seeing now is a video advertising Urban Code Velocity, which is the last product, or not the last, but a product that I worked on before I came to GitLab. And this was trying to do a similar kind of thing in terms of helping you understand your flow across many different tools. And the dots represented specific issues or work items. And each stage could be defined with a query that, and then there were value stream kind of metrics underneath. And if something needed attention, there'd be a little red circle on to highlight it. But one of the things that you see here that I think is really interesting is that if you look at the way people use Kanban when they're just using visual boards, it's not a linear flow. They actually will have branches in their flow, different queues where work is coming in and being groomed by different people or different activities. And then they might join in an area. And the traditional Kanban board can't depict that, whereas something like this could. And I think that can be a really valuable tool in describing your process. So that's all I wanted to share to just get some ideas going.
I think one other thing kind of about value stream, why it's important is like at GitLab, we talk about merge request throughput and like having a certain amount per month per engineer. But one of the things we're not looking at is like lead time. So I think it was surprising when we did that ad hoc retro, when I brought up the data point that like even omitting weekends, like the average time an issue goes from ready for development till like out of verification is 53 days, right? Yeah. So like you're looking at, when you fragment your work across all these different things, you're actually slowing down delivering any one piece of value in its like totality. And I think that's where our boards don't help us understand that, and don't help us like not work on a bunch of fragmented things, but work on things from start to finish. Like even if you have 10 MRs, you can do 10 MRs against one piece of value instead of one MR against 10 pieces of value.
Right.
That makes sense.
And get it over the line. Yeah, that's super important because our natural instincts often have us doing the wrong thing in terms of optimizing that whole flow. And so prompting users to take the right action that actually accelerates, delivery and reduces cycle time is something people need a lot of help with, because our instincts are usually wrong actually about that. We tend to think, for example, that putting a high priority on an item will make it go faster. But the study that I have done suggests that it can be more important what day of the week you start it when you actually look at the metrics as far as when something gets delivered. So just providing more kind of insights and prompting users, making it easy for users to do the right thing, pick up the right work, I think is pretty important. All right, I'm very anxious to see us get creative. And so I don't want to talk anymore, but if we could go heads down for a few minutes, just drawing some things. The whole point here is to just come up with crazy ideas that might help us learn and take us to another step of innovation.
So if I can maybe frame the ideation exercise, it's probably useful if we are we go divergent, but we focus it on a particular sort of opportunity or area that we want to tackle. So maybe based on the stuff that Gabe and John Mason were talking about, we can sort of frame the job to be done specifically that we want to tackle, or the view or the workflow that you're interested in particular, and then we can sort of diverge around that.
The things that are of interest to me are new ways of visualizing the flow that help us understand where things are, and help me in my team to pick up the right next piece of work with relatively few motions. Gabe, your comments?
No, I think that's right. I think it is like, what do I need to do to help unblock my team? And then what does my team need to do to help deliver customer value faster or in a more efficient way, basically. And understanding that, like, without having to open tabs and like just in one place, one view, one workflow. I think that's basically the job to be done. I don't know if Keenan, you want to add anything or?
No, sir. I'm processing. I'm getting through my first cup of coffee here, so I'm running cool. Below the speed limit. No, I think where I'm just trying to keep, I guess where I'm struggling is also it's impossible for me to ignore the expectation from the folks coming over from the Jira platform, and so this is where I usually get locked into the idea of horizontal columns and drag and drop functionality, and so I'm trying to break my presuppositions on what that should look like or looks like for users transitioning over.
I would say you can still have drag and drop, like I showed in, like you can drag and drop stuff in Pivotal Tracker,
yeah.
But it also automatically moves things for you. So like you don't have to have one or the other, I guess.
Yeah.
But the job is basically like we're sitting down as a team, and we need to figure out the next thing to work on, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and we need to move that work item through whatever our workflow is in the most efficient way with as little context switching.
So I mean, isn't the biggest barrier? Sorry.
No, I'm good.
Isn't the biggest barrier with that statement block that we don't have fantastic backlog management?
Could be part of it, but it's also like, even if we had fantastic backlog management, we still have to manually drag things through our issue board now. We still have to manually move things and like go open tabs and like look at the latest comment and then open a merge request to find the link to review it. Then just all these things that's where we talk about, like, that's clicks and that's brain space that we're losing basically to wasteful exercises instead of making it like something that the user shouldn't have to go look anywhere for any of that stuff.
Can I ask a quick question? This is really a question to all the PMs, but would you say it's more about clearing obstacles and reducing interferences such as blockers and that kind of thing, or helping the team to understand the highest value and the priority order? I thought it was really interesting what John was saying about setting the highest priority doesn't necessarily make a difference. So how do you help the team to understand what is highest value and what needs to be priority one after the other? And I can recognize that might be part of our exercise here, but just curious what your responses are.
That is part of the problem, right? So in Pivotal Tracker, it's easy because you just maintain and prioritize lists of like your backlog and your sprints. Everything has one view, one order. It's all relative to each other. So an engineer just goes and picks up the next thing on the list. They don't ever have to look anywhere else. So like, what's the next thing that I can click start on? And that's what they do, right? I think the where that falls short a little bit is that it still doesn't show you. It requires the product manager, somebody, to groom the backlog and to organize everything in relative priority to each other according to how that ties into the epics and which things need to be delivered first. So the product manager usually can get that wrong too, being like, oh, well, I'm going to switch the team here and work on this a little bit, or switch the team here and work on this a little bit, or it's a manual prioritization process, and there's methodologies that you can employ to like make that more automated or more quantifiable. We can go there as part of the divergent. I mean, whatever we want to explore. Like, I think we kind of talked about the problems that we face with our product, how some other products approach it. But it's more or less like, yes, prioritization, yes, stepping in when team members are blocked and understanding when I need to take action to help the flow smooth out, or like if it's dependent on me, all of those things.
Cool. So just to frame the challenge, so we're sort of aligned around where we're diverging. I think there's two things that we can address, and maybe we can spend 5 to 10 minutes of divergent time on the challenge or the thing of for PMs of what's blocking me and how can I sort that out for teams, and then another 5 to 10 minutes we can spend on what are the value drivers happening, or where is the value within my flow and how can I address that? So communicating that sort of value to PMs. Does that make sense to break it down into 2 10-minute sort of sprints, and then we come back and we can, well, actually, we can do both at the same time, and then we can spend around 15 minutes of clustering stuff together and figuring out some different ideas and concepts that emerge from it.
That sounds good. And I would say not
Yeah.
just for PMs, it would be for like anyone on the team should be able to understand these things too and make decisions on their own based on that. So
cool. And one thing that we've used in the past, ignore that logo right there, is a concept sheet. So the minimum unit that you want to be using for these sort of divergent activities isn't a sticky note. It's a concept sheet, something which gives you a rough idea with an illustration. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to get the point across. Something with a title, some notations, just to get the idea out there. You can do that on a piece of paper. You can do that in Mural, whatever you want. And then we'll try and aim for like 10 to 15 of these each. And you don't need to worry about whether they're quality or not. Just get as many things out there as possible and sort of just stretch yourself. So let's spend 15 minutes using concept sheets to try and address different ways of helping teams figure out what's blocking them and what their value drivers are. And if you want, I'm going to work in Mural. Feel free to work in Mural or use a piece of paper and show us later, but I'll be using the concept sheet style. How does that sound to everyone? Ready to go?
Well, one quick question. Is there value in establishing kind of a problem statement with this first, or just, I mean, I think we can take what we've got here and just move forward, but just curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think this is going to be one of many rounds, and I'd rather we were a little less structured and just a little bit more brainstormy at first, and then we can, after we've kind of gotten our fingers into the problem a little bit, we can hone and, we can get a little crisper and so on. But I'm curious to just see everybody get their fingers dirty with the problem and play around.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so the problem statement in this is, how can we help teams figure out what's blocking them? How can we help teams figure out what's valuable? Cool. Let's get going. With it, we'll meet back at 40, 50. Yeah, we'll meet back at 10 to the hour. Or we'll go on mute or off mute at 10 to the hour.
Sounds good.
5-minute warning. Two minutes. So that's it. What I recommend we do is each of us takes 30 seconds to pitch out the ideas that we have nice and quickly. We put them down inside the mural board. We just sort of label them within sticky notes, and then we can cluster them together and figure out some areas that we can explore with regards to our designs and product after this meeting. So I can do a quick demonstration of this. I've started to lay out the stuff in Mural, but I'll whip through the different points that I have. So one of the small points was basically creating predefined stages within Kanban boards and within the value stream. So we are able to sort of flick between those two things. Another idea was creating like a personal value matrix 2x2 chart that consultants use, showing urgency on one dimension and value on the other, and allowing you to sort of see where there are areas of high value that you can pursue. Having prompts when a developer picks up like an issue or an MR, prompting them saying you could be working on something else, which if that's urgent or something like that. Representing the value stream, abstracting away a lot of the details of the units, but showing it as like a sales funnel almost. Allowing users just to toggle between different views within a Kanban board. So being able to toggle between this sort of Kanban view and then the value stream view and so on, without jumping between pages. And then thinking about like value drivers almost like dependencies, and creating like a mind map or a network map between those things to see where hotspots may lie. So I will write all those things out in Mural, and feel free to someone next to pitch.
You can go next if you're still working, Alexis, unless you prefer to. All right, I'm going to share my screen real quick. I probably should have gone more for number of ideas rather than level of detail, but I started out with kind of a standard board, swim lanes, because I love Pivotal's approach to having the dates in. They're not visible here, but my thought was sort of a predefined fixed backlog that you can pull from. Ready is kind of the things that have been prioritized. Some of this is pretty standard, of course, but also including a couple of additional features to help provide insight to the team. So we have now a configurable section, and then also a recommended section. So what I'm thinking with that, and this is all very messy and I apologize for that. Let me see if I can rotate this really quick, is that you've got these options within configure to allow you to show determine what you want to see and not see, just to kind of clear the clutter off of the board and simplify the view. So if you want to see labels, you can turn on labels. If you don't, you can hide them. Same with participants. But then also having more options to see additional types of work items in addition to just issues. You can also expand to see maybe your epics and your MRs, and haven't quite sorted through how that would all relate to one another in the actual board view, but just giving the user more power to configure what they're looking at. And then a recommended section. So based on maybe the settings that the PM has configured, it provides recommendations for what needs to be defined as priority, because Gabe said that sometimes the PMs don't always get it right. So maybe the system can help to provide insight to them as to what to work on first based on timelines and weight and team capacity, and then maybe make recommendations with an option for them to move those issues into sort of a priority position in the board view. And that's what I've got.
I can go next, I guess.
Go for it.
I just did one view, and it was the basic idea of having everything in one board, basically, where you have everything grouped by dots, and the dots are actually the issues. But whatever the workflow steps are, the idea is like these would be configurable by the end user and what they do. But you have more or less grouping everything into this like kind of feature bucket, and then the top feature or the most important bucket of things is always at the top and the second, and you have to maintain a numbered order and it's visible like to everyone basically. So like, but from this view, I can add a new epic or big feature, and I can see everything grouped together. I also have like my my cycle time more or less in each of these stage, and I'm highlighting automatically what the biggest constraint in my flow is, because you can only have one bottleneck at a time. And so this is basically highlighting what that is, and it will change dynamically based on what the bottleneck is as things evolve. But then your little dots kind of are your status indicators of things. And so like for this one example, you know, the average time is 4 days here, but this one's been here for 7 days, which is like, let's understand why. Is it stuck? Do we need to like support that? And then contextually changing these dots based on other things, like, you know, if something's blocked, go in here, can we get it unblocked? But then all rolling that up into like, here's an estimated completion date. So if I can figure out how to cut scope from this, or, you know, remove things, that date might change. But the idea is you could open any of these in this view, like in an overlay or something like that, to interact with the issue or the object to get more context without having to leave this view. So that's what I got.
Nice. And Alexis, do you want to do a quick pitch?
Sure.
You've got some nice stuff.
I probably have like the least context here, but hey, I went for it. Mine is probably a little bit more silly crazy. But yeah, from the conversation, I was hearing that like the important things I pulled out is like highlighting what hasn't been groomed, highlighting what has been sitting for a long time, highlighting what is sat at what stage, highlighting customer needs, what people ask for, letting engineers know what the next thing you know, they should be working on, or automating that maybe in some way, highlighting that things need to be updated, lock in certain dates. I was thinking maybe there's some automation around that. And then I think like a single source of truth is always kind of a problem. Something I think would be interesting would be some kind of rules. I didn't like get that far into any of these, but yeah, like the idea of prioritizing by customer, I think could be kind of interesting. I don't know what that would look like. I was thinking maybe with the upvotes we have, there's some kind of priority line, and then we auto prioritize highly things that users care about. And then if we deprioritize those, it's like very intentional about like, okay, cool, like you're disappointing 80 people by deprioritizing this, right? And like you have to say, okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. And if it sits for a long time or you deprioritize, maybe it changed and it's like 80 customers are being ignored. Deleting ungroomed issues. So I like the idea. Gabe was talking about how he would just get rid of issues if they had sat for a long time, basically. So maybe we let people set rules around that. Like, hey, if this is set, and it doesn't have to be a column, if this is sitting ungroomed, I will say in a certain amount of time, if it sits ungroomed from creation, it's going to self-destruct. And we let people know that that's happening, but it happens. And that would maybe help people be more intentional about like, okay, a lot of things are getting destructed, and maybe there's even a way for them to go back and view those things. Auto plan mode, again, this is just scratching the surface, but maybe even just when we allow people to kind of set their capacity, we could be like, all right, Donald has capacity to take on like 8, you know, a weight of 8. Kushal can take 10. If Kushal is, you know, he has some capacity, things that are groomed and just sitting, just auto assign to him. So those are my 3 wild ideas. Keenan, do you have anything to talk about?
Yeah, let me.
Whoever.
No, I got one. I'm just trying to drag my. I drew it on my desk, so I needed to move my windows around.
Heck yeah,
sure,
let's go.
Yeah, so this is a real simple idea I've been kicking around in my head. Can you see it? Or can you see the picture at least?
Yep.
It's the idea of like a dependency chain or a dependency map that we can visualize to help showcase if maybe work's been done out of sequence, or help identify what work should happen next. So, you know, here are the high level ideas that, you know, if you hover over an item, or I don't know, click a button, whatever, if you access a dependency map, it actually highlights issues that are blocking each other, and like has it as an actual, like the full chain, not just this is the thing that blocks me, but this is then the thing that blocks that as well. So like in this example, you've got 2 items in the reviewing box, but when you look at the dependency map, it's like, oh, it actually looks like there's blockers that are still in the to-do column that we would need to do to actually move this work forward. that's what I got.
Cool. So
Awesome.
we're at time right now. But what I recommend that we do is we flesh out and just make sure that each of these concepts that we've created is highlighted within this mural document and sort of annotated just enough so we understand what's going on. And then from there, maybe Gabe and John Mason can start highlighting some of the ideas that are most attractive and that maybe we could explore or combine or whatever it may be.
Sounds good.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for that. I'll add in the rest of my ideas and pictures and stuff to this mural board, and we can just sort of tidy it up and use it to prioritize where we want to focus.
Cool. Right quick before we hop off, how do we feel this went? Do we like it? Not like it? Helpful? Not helpful?
There are lots of ways to cook on machine learning.
Oh, I thought someone was talking.
All right.
I think I'm
CNN open in a different tab, and it likes to start ads.
Dare you, Keenan. I think it'd be sometimes when I hop into these, sometimes it's like helpful to have, I don't know, I used to use like how might we, but have that job or something ready before the workshop, and then we could do more cycles of ideation. But I think like this was a great introduction to it and like understanding the problem.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, I think having a little bit of focus helps, and then also just accepting the context of the reality that we're in, right? There are things that we have users who expect, and we do have, like, you know, customized workflows. Like, I struggle to see a scenario where we get away from that and still make progress against Jira. So I think it's like it's great that we have all these great examples in the market to draw inspiration from, but like focus on like a little more focus on here's 2 or 3 things to focus on, or like maybe one job to be done to really nail in it'll help me at least kind of mentally prep for a session like this.
Yeah, good feedback.
But overall, yeah, this is great.
Cool.
Yeah, I think echoing coming in with a more clearly defined problem statement and sort of a set of inspirations informing sort of why it's interesting, and then allocating potentially a little bit more time to this as well, so it doesn't feel so rushed, and we have more opportunity to go through like a collaborative cycle. So yeah, I think next time I've done like a lot of these design thinking workshop things, so I'm happy to sort of prep for the next time we do it with you guys, and we can sort of set ourselves up to sort of not run out of time.
Cool. Sounds good. Great feedback as well.
But I want to say I also really loved going through the different products with y'all. Like maybe that could be even a separate session, but I love doing that too. So I thought that was valuable. So like maybe it's 2 things, right? And we could utilize time in different ways.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. I like that.
All right. Have a great Thursday, everyone.
Yeah,
Ciao.
thanks for setting this up though. It's good.
That was.
Thank you.